everybody, welcome back to Electric Cafe. Today's album review is on Tomita's 1976 album, Bermuda Triangle. This is number 6 in my 30 days, day number 6 on my 30 days of focusing on one new age album per month in the month of January of 2025. So I thought it'd be fitting to throw a Tomita record in here. Definitely one of the coolest artworks I can remember recalling as a kid. Always loved this artwork with the little ship down there and the boats. Right, the devil right there, right? Really cool. But then also the back, super cool. Look at the aliens, sort of like the sort of aqua-looking aliens, right? Crazy, right? It's a really pretty girl, and she's kind of, I don't know if she's almost half. She's also sort of like a mermaid there too, with the fins and stuff like that. And you can see the planes are still going through there. There's the ship up there about to drop in. Just really cool artwork. And this album was pretty much probably one of the pinnacles of. And another reason why I thought I'd review it is it's one of the pinnacles of the end of sort of the sound of more classical space music. I have some space music from the early 50s and stuff like that, and if you ever watch like Twilight Zone movies, or I'm sure any kind of spacey or horror movie from the 50s, they're going to have that sort of eerie electronic music. And I have, so I kind of collect those type of albums. One of these days I'll have to show what records I have from the 50s and 60s that are sort of space related. I kind of collect them over the years. And, this one is, a lot of that was, when you look at like space music, like in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, it's more classical, right? They haven't perfected the electronic music for the most part. Synthesizers are still pretty new even by middle 70s, and even though they're starting to use some sound effects here and there, for the most part, there is probably a feeling of there that it's not really real music, and there's really producers like Tomita, who's been classically trained, who's been doing soundtrack music for a long time, classical music. So he sort of incorporated a little bit of classical pieces into his own renditions, and sort of including a little bit of electronic music, sort of almost making them electronic versions. Like there's the famous producer, famous composer, forgive me if I pronounce this wrong, Prokofiev, probably butchering that name, but he's well represented on here. But then also you have John Williams. He did close. He does a rendition of a track off Close Encounters of the Third Kind here, which sort of has the doo 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 doo, the movie, the movie sound, the soundtrack from the movie. But there's also a couple of Tomita original projects in here as well, and but also he's pulled stuff from, again, that Russian composer from Romeo and Juliet and Symphony Number 5, second movement, first movement. But he's all kind of tying it together with kind of a Bermuda Triangle, sci-fi, kind of spacey kind of edge. And it's kind of, in a way, it's kind of the end of that era, because, by the early 80s, you not only do not have like artwork like this in the really early 80s anymore, but just this kind of classical styled space music was really kind of coming to the end, as people started to really pretty much use keyboards and synthesizers, and it makes sense. I'm sure it's, as much as you'd like to. I'm sure it would cost quite a bit of money to get together, um, artists that play on this level, um, you know, performing on an album that may not sell a lot. But Tomita, unfortunately passed away in 2016, the age of about roughly 84. But just a revolutionary producer, in a lot of ways, conductor, artist in his own right, well regarded, by the way, as well, from everybody from Stevie Wonder to a lot of the new age artists. Definitely name check Tomita, and and I've always been gravitated towards the artwork. On this particular album, it's really kind of adventurous and fun. It is kind of like, it's very much like listening to a soundtrack, any kind of spacey soundtrack of the 70s, like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, or anything really. It's just, it's adventurous, it's fun. It's basically an homage to orchestra music, but it's kind of taking pieces that he wants to do and then redo them. I think there's a nice depth to the compositions as well. Some passages have nice distance, and then there's the nice dynamic. Some are a little bit, do a little bit of everything in there. They can be a little over the top and then be a little bit meandering and spacey. There's a good combination of that. This is kind of probably the example that you would give of a new age soundtrack. It doesn't necessarily go to an album, but I wouldn't consider this space rock at all, of course, and it's not prog rock at all. So, is it ambient music? It's kind of new age, right? It's soundtrack music. So I think that's probably the definition that fits the best with it. But the album is consistent. It's a consistent album. There's 12 pieces on here. A good mix of shorter songs and longer songs, but it is a fairly long album. I want to say it's probably somewhere close to like 55 minutes. It's a good long soundtrack for sure, but it's an enjoyable one, and it's kind of a period piece. It's something that I think it's kind of the album that if somebody wasn't into electronic music and they were into, like, I don't know, let's say they were older, 60 or 70 or 80, and they didn't know about this, and they're used to like listening to like 60s and 70s and 80s music, and you play them something like this, it would be like sort of like giving somebody a new ambient record today. Like it would kind of be on that level, and this is a good example of one of, in my opinion, one of Tomita's best records, and I think he does a great job of taking other people's pieces, and turning them into his own, and then him sort of, taking the pieces and really kind of running with them, and then also kind of including some nice passages in the songs and sort of expanding upon them, and doing electronic versions of orchestra song, I think, and putting it to a theme, and combined with the great artwork. It's always been a great example of mid-70s new age music for me, and verging on classical music because where it comes from. I didn't necessarily, sometimes when I feel like I want to critique or review a ambient album or a new age album or experimental album, so I thought it was best to kind of rate the overview of this album and not so much the songs. So I didn't really rate the songs individually. I don't think I'll ever have like a top 100 new age songs, but I will have, a top 100 new age ambient or new age or ambient albums. So I figure on sometimes it's really more about the whole of the album than songs here and there. So I gave the overall album a score and didn't really rate the individual songs on this particular review. But I gave the overall album a 75 out of 100. I think it's I think it's a very good album as it is. It's a very good album as far as like a cover album because he's taking other pieces. Mostly, he's taking other pieces, people's work, and then tying it to a really good theme and making an album that you can listen to or play in the background and not really particularly like listen to it kind of demands your attention, but it doesn't necessarily overly demand your attention to where you don't get the gist of the album by not focusing on it. Like you still feel like you get the album and you enjoy the album. And again, it's adventurous and fun. And the thing I think that's important about something like this versus let's not to put Synergy down, but I just did a Synergy album. I guess it was yesterday, right? And when he does keyboard leads and keyboard sounds as the main hook of the song, sometimes it can be a little bit cheesy and sort of where if they're orchestra and they go a little bit dramatic, then I don't think anybody really bats an eye because they kind of expect orchestral pieces to be kind of, all of a sudden go dramatic or, I think that's sort of understood in classical music more so than in electronic music. And I guess I don't know exactly why that is, but I just think people that like electronic music more than classical people are going to be a little bit younger, so they don't necessarily want something that is like over the top and sort of poppy sounding or major chords, right? We'd rather have some minor chords and minimalism and experimentalism in there, and that's where I'm at it as well. But I think as far as like, since this is more classical than electronic, or new age, then the soundtrack, because of the theme, is really important, and that's where I really enjoy. Like when I do mixes, I like when I do ambient mixes. Maybe I'll put some of my ambient mixes on here someday. I just did one last week, and I really enjoy doing themes because, how do you pick music when I have 10,000 CDs and 10,000 records, right? It's like hard for me to like pick what I want to play, right? But if I give it a theme, if I say, hey, I want to do a soundtrack that's for the Bermuda Triangle, I'm going to think, okay, well, Bermuda Triangle is in the water, right? Okay, that's a little sci-fi. Okay, that's a little bit dramatic, obviously. That's, again, it's in the water, so maybe there's some peaceful sounds in there as well. There's some ships and planes, so maybe some background sound effects if I have them, or, it gives me an idea of how to put a listener in that realm of being in the Bermuda Triangle, right? Having that dramatic edge and that sort of that feeling that you're on a trip, or you're sort of on an adventure or just traveling, but then there's something dramatic happens, right? You don't know what's going on. You don't know where you are, right? So like that kind of mystery and sci-fi and uneasiness and uncertainty, it allows me to pick music, right? So it allows me to go like, okay, well, aquatic, new age, okay, let me choose this track. Like, you know what I mean? Like I can do that and then sort of piece together a mix that might be representative of whatever that theme is. And, that helps me like do mixes. Same point to him, he's a composer, right? He wants to sort of do a sci-fi tribute to some Bermuda Triangle and sort of then take some older classical pieces and sort of put them into that. That's kind of similar to what I'm doing. I'm not comparing myself at all to Tomita, but I'm just saying it's kind of the same the same strategy of where you're taking your listeners, right? I'm not a composer. I don't write music, but I play music, and I DJ. So I'm going to do that in my own way, where Tomita does that in his own way. And I think when you think of like making a theme of where to take your listeners, and one is really cool as this, and as sci-fi as this, and you do it from a classical perspective, I don't think you can really get much better than this. Especially for 1970s. It's just it's it's an enjoyable listen, and it's fun, and it's adventurous, and it's thematic, and it's a soundtrack, and it's just it's enjoyable fun. It's just it's a good listen, and I feel like I give it some extra merit because he does such a good job of piecing together a theme for it, with his work. So hats off to him. But yeah, Tomita's a legend. I'm curious if you have any favorite Tomita records. I'll probably do Planets next in the future. That's another one of my favorites of his. But there's some other ones in there as well. But curious if you have any favorites from Tomita, or what is your overall thoughts on this particular album. All right, thanks so much for listening.